Hello and welcome to the next of our 5-minute summaries for your Germany paper. Today we'll talk about Germany and the impact of the First World War. So our 4 key points that we're going to discuss are these. German people initially supported the war, however, as it dragged on, a certain war weariness set in and morale dropped. Secondly, the Allied naval blockades caused widespread food, medicine and clothing shortages, and this was further exacerbated by Spanish flu. By 1918, there were widespread rebellions as people called for a revolution. The first of those was the Kiel Mutiny. And at the end just before the end of the war on the 9th of November, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated and the ruling Social Democrat Party signed the armistice on the 11th of November that ended the war. You'll probably remember looking at this photograph. It shows Adolf Hitler in a crowd reacting to the news of the outbreak of war. Initially, as in many European countries, there was a lot of support for the war in Germany. However, so one of the key questions that you need to be able to answer is how the First World War affected the lives of ordinary German people. So we're going to talk about what contributed to this growing sense of war weariness and the calls for revolution in Germany by 1918. Firstly, the Allied naval blockades had a significant impact on German quality of life and food shortages. So by 1915, the Allied sinking of German supply ships was so successful, it's thought that German imports had fallen 55% compared to their pre-war levels. This was exacerbated in the winter of 1916-17 by really a ruined harvest due to poor weather conditions for months on end, very wet, very cold. The harvest over the winter of 1916-17 was destroyed, and that led to something called turnip winter, because in terms of as root vegetables went, that was all that had survived this poor harvest. So those two things led to significant food shortages and rationing being introduced in Germany. This was further exacerbated in 1918 with the onset of Spanish flu. Now, it's difficult to know exactly how many German people died of Spanish flu, but estimates are somewhere between 250 to 300,000 people died of Spanish flu in 1918. No doubt made worse by their general malnutrition and the fact that the country was trying to fight a war at the same time. All of these things contributed to war weariness. That was also compounded by reports coming back from the front line of terrible conditions for the soldiers there and shortages for them, and also some significant losses militarily on the front line by the end of the war as well. All of these things had an impact on rebellions and calls for, there were calls for an end to the war, there were calls for the Kaiser to stand down, and some left-wing communist groups, we'll talk about those separately in another revision video, were calling for a revolution, like the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. So all of these things had a profound impact on morale in Germany for the war. Got some photographs here from the period. So above there you've got a Berlin soup kitchen, and then a poster from partway through the war in 1916 saying, "Farmers, do your duty, the cities are hungry." And here, this is a photograph actually from after the war in 1920, but it shows how rationing and food shortages continued even beyond the war. So this is a horse in the street being butchered for food. So food rationing was still in place, and there was a thriving black market, so you could get things that you couldn't get according to your ration card. You could buy those things on the black market in all sorts of goods, including things like horse meat. And this photograph here is of a demonstration towards the end of the war. This is in November of 1918, just before the war ended, and this is in relation to the Kiel Mutiny. So because of all the hardships suffered during the war, negotiations for an end to the war were underway in November of 1918, but the German Navy was sent out for like a last-ditch battle against the British Navy, and sailors of the Thuringia and the Helgoland ships refused to go out, and instead they staged a demonstration. Now 1,000 of those sailors were arrested and sent to a place called Kiel on the north coast in Germany, and they were not released, and mass demonstrations ensued, and about 40,000 sailors and workers marched on Kiel, and also Wilhelmshaven, which is pictured here. So this is in relation to the Kiel Mutiny, and it's a large-scale demonstration against the Kaiser and against the war. Now, on the 9th of November 1918, just before the armistice, the end of the war was signed, Kaiser Wilhelm abdicated amidst these widespread demonstrations. The one in Kiel kind of triggered demonstrations to happen in major cities around the country. So the Kaiser abdicated towards the end of the war, and as the largest party in the Reichstag, the Social Democrat Party sort of took over in the interim, and it was they that signed the armistice in 1918 on the 11th of November. And we discussed this source in class, and we looked at how there was a lot of ill feeling. Although the German people wanted an end to the war, they didn't expect the war to end in this way. Now, this cartoon here is a German cartoon published in 1919, and the man holding the knife stabbing the German soldiers in the back there is Philipp Scheidemann, who was the first Chancellor of the Weimar Republic. And behind him is Matthias Erzberger, the representative who signed the armistice ending the war. The Weimar Republic became known as the November Criminals for betraying Germany by signing this armistice at the end of the war. And we discussed how it really wasn't a good start for these Weimar politicians. Okay, so that's Germany and the First World War, a bit of a very quick run through. I have gone over the 5 minutes, but those are your 4 key points. Germans initially supported the war, but as it went on, war weariness set in, morale dropped. Allied naval blockades caused widespread food shortages. Spanish flu further exacerbated these problems. There were widespread rebellions and calls for revolution by 1918, the first being in Kiel. And the Kaiser, following these, abdicated. He left the throne, and the ruling SPD called an end to the war and signed the armistice on the 11th of November. Now, to test what you know, I want you to pause this video and I want you to try and answer those questions and either go back through the video or check your notes to see if you've got the answers. Okay, thank you very much for listening. I'll speak to you next time.